Welcome back to the reading room. I am Josh Bearheart Hawk, author of the journal, GPS Signal Lost, and Legends and Tales Creepy and Fun Stories for Telling Around the Campfire. And thanks for always liking my posts. If you're here, I assume that you have already watched the entirety of the journal from chapter 1 through 23. If you haven't watched that yet, go over and check it out. I've got an entire playlist with all 23 chapters of the journal. But this video is a retrospective, and we're going to be talking about the journal, a little bit about how it came to be, and that ending. Because if you got to the end, you might have found it was probably not what you expected. So to start out, the journal itself started as a kind of side project. I was doing a series of videos on my main channel called Cemetery Chats, and in those I was having a character appear in the background dressed like the Grim Reaper. And I had a story that I wanted to weave in where the Grim Reaper was going to be talking to me and getting me to take over his job. And it progressed for a while before I finally kind of spun it off into its own series. And I made a few videos called The Reaper. But I never really got very far with it because I was like, I don't know what to do with this, because it was difficult to film, plan, edit, act, all of that kind of stuff for each video. It was taking a lot of time and energy that I just didn't have at the time for a million different reasons. So I kind of dropped it, but then I was like, I really want to carry this story on. What do I do with it? And I had never written a book. I'd always wanted to write something. I'd written little things when I was younger, as a teenager, and that kind of thing. So I was like, I'm going to try my hand at this writing thing. And to keep myself on track, I decided I'm going to write every single week. I'm going to write a chapter. I'm going to put the chapter up on my website. And I even recorded a few and put them on my main channel. But it was more just the audio portion, right? With just sound effects and that kind of stuff. I didn't get all the way through it, though. So a few months of solid writing, and that's where the journal came from, was getting that story written and put out there. Now, the story itself, because I made myself the main character. I used my town, the town I grew up in, Mount Vernon, Ohio, as kind of the backdrop. I wanted it to be very personal, and part of that goes to the name Heath Borgiers, which I've had people say, that they didn't know how to pronounce it, or they'd never heard a name like that where I come up with the name. And Heath Borgiers is actually an anagram of Josh Bearheart. And so it's kind of, you see where Josh is going to wind up based off of Heath, and you see where Heath is going to go based off of Josh. So it kind of goes back and forth, and that's how those characters are tied together. I layered throughout the story. There's layered sections of, like, you can tell that there's something weird going on with Josh the whole time. You don't necessarily know what it is up front, but, like, that's the whole point of a mystery, is solving what's going on. And there's little clues and things sprinkled throughout. Now, there's a couple of pieces in there that I felt like there's a lot of stuff I felt like I could have done a lot better. It's my debut novel, so it's a work in progress. It was something I really wanted to get out there, but, like, I never really resolved the thing with the head, where Heath finds he gets the head in the box. Never really resolved that, and I never really had a resolution for it. It was kind of a red herring. It was just like a, hey, look over here, pay attention to this thing type of thing, to keep you guessing and keep you wondering. There was never really a resolution built for that. I'm sure there's other things in the story that I maybe didn't tie off completely, but I don't think they really all needed to be tied off based on the kind of story it was. The ending of the story, I have been asked, what choice did Josh make? Well, I didn't want to provide that because I want the reader, or in this case the listener, to decide for themselves what they think Josh would have done or what they would have done in that position. I don't want to skew it by saying that Josh did this or Josh did that, because for one thing, I thought about, I could leave it open for a potential sequel. But more than that, it was, I didn't want to taint the audience's choice and have people arguing over what they think he should or shouldn't have done, or my ending, my version of it. I wanted them to be able to discuss and debate what they would have done and why they would have done that. Because it is a very difficult choice to make. And I've had at least one person tell me, oh, the choice is easy. I'd go ahead and just take the non-existence and have Heath be tortured for 5,000 years. But there's a level of empathy there on the one hand of, well, Heath had to go through this, so, maybe he deserves to have a happy ending. He had his life ended as well. But then there's the idea of but also for Josh, he wants the opportunity to get back with his family and have friends and people he knew and that kind of thing in his afterlife, having that opportunity there, but then also having the risk of, but if the person I picked doesn't want to play along, So I wanted to have all of that built into it and leave it open to interpretation for that reason, because I thought it was important. Not every story has to have a happy ending. Not every story has to have a complete ending. And sometimes that can be frustrating as an audience to be reading or watching something and have an ambiguous ending. But for me, I felt like the ending wasn't as ambiguous as people might think. Josh doesn't make a decision well, he makes a decision, but it's not announced. But that ambiguity, I think, helps build the story up and helps drive it forward. So that was kind of my thinking with where it was going. I'm super proud of it, the book in general, just because, not a lot of people actually ever finish a book. I've had a ton of people come up to me at shows and be like, oh, I've always wanted to write a book, or I've got something, I've got an idea for one, or I've started writing one, but I just haven't ever finished it. And so to be able to finish a book, you might hear the train sounding in the background, apparently. I've got the windows open. It's a beautiful morning outside. So if the train's there, I'm sorry for that. But to be able to finish a book, to be able to say I wrote something, this is about 53,000 words, 54,000 words. And to be able to do that was a huge accomplishment. It was something I never imagined I would be able to do. And then, of course, I followed that up with other books. I've got Legends and Tales and GPS Signal Lost, and I'm going to be reading GPS Signal Lost, wherever that's at. That's right here. This was my most recent book as of this recording. I'm going to be reading that, I think, next. Because that was the next story, story in and of itself. Legends and Tales is a compilation of different stories. But I learned a lot from writing the journal that allowed me to branch out and do these other books. And if you paid attention to, if you know anything at all about Greek mythology, you probably recognize some things. I am a big fan of Greek mythology. It is in my books, specifically Legends, or the journal and GPS Signal Lost has some Greek mythology. The journal, if you notice, Asphodel Estates, is kind of a reference to the Asphodel Meadows. Persephone's mother is Demeter, which in Greek mythology was the mother of Persephone, who was stolen by Hades. So I wanted to kind of weave in, but with my own take on it. I didn't want to just rip straight from Greek mythology and say, well, I'm going to just layer this onto my story. It's my own version of my own take of Greek mythology spun in a different way. Hermes is the guide through the Asphodel Meadows. He is the guide for people to the afterlife. And in this case, Hermes plays as kind of the guide. He's the caretaker of the estate, but he's also the guide to the souls as they come through. He hasn't just guided Heath and Josh. He's been around for a long time. And that's where the story, I wove into it the story of Mark Appleton and Hermes and all that kind of stuff, and Hermes as a boy, but in reality that was kind of I don't want to say falsely, it wasn't necessarily a red herring as much as it was a way to kind of make that real for the audience. Hermes, the boy that was taken by Mark Appleton, was another layer into what would wind up being Mark Appleton becoming a Reaper. Because he was a Reaper who then led into Heath, who then led into Josh. Everybody has their own thing going on. And they each have their own story, their own way that they found out. They've all got their own situation. So I wanted to layer that all in, and at the same time have these mythological things in there and these elements that you can recognize if you read through, and if you go through it and really pay attention. I put in some details in there that to this day, there's been a few people that have read, and I don't think anybody's captured all the details. I don't think anybody's really picked up on everything that I added in, which is kind of cool. We'll see down the road. Maybe somebody will eventually come along. I would love to see like a, you know, the old like game theorist type of videos and that kind of stuff. I would love to see somebody do that with one of my books, because whether it's GPS Signal Loss or the journal, I've got some other books coming out that are going to kind of layer some of that stuff in. I love weaving in mysteries, and I love weaving in things that you don't expect to see and that you won't see on the first watch, the first read. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for liking my post. I just wanted to do this retrospective to kind of talk about the journal and where it came from and what it means, because I think that's a good way to wrap it up. It's kind of like a book club. If you think of this channel as like a book club, you can read through the books with me, and we can talk about what they mean and talk about the different parts of them. And I want to know your thoughts down in the comments below as well. If I get enough comments on this, if enough people are like, oh yeah, and pointing out their own things and things that they've caught throughout the book, I'll make a follow-up video, retrospective, including comments. I'll read through your comments and let you know where you were right and wrong, and what I thought and about your thoughts and that kind of thing. So leave those comments down below. Like the video, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. You just sat through a retrospective for a book that you may or may not have listened to or read. So maybe subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, But with that being said, I do want to thank you all for watching. Like I said, GPS Signal Loss may have already started by the time this video comes out. I'm not really sure how I'm going to do that. But everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.